Hello, this is KSQD 90.7 Weekly Cutting Edge. I am your host, Galina Hale, Professor of Economics at UCSC and Faculty Director at the Institute for Social Transformation. My guest today is Angela Lipanovich. She's a co-founder of SolarWAVE Action and founder and principal attorney at Estriatus Law, where she serves both as an outside general counsel and project-specific advisor to entities and system owners across the cleantech and renewable energy spectrum, from early-stage startups and established public enterprises to private individuals and businesses. She founded Estriatus Law not to practice law, but to support the people and companies building a cleaner, smarter, more sustainable future. With every client, every project, and every partnership, she brings mission-driven, legal guidance designed to clear obstacles and create momentum, because she believes the future depends on it. I'm very happy to have Angela Lipanovich with us. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Galina. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
So let's start maybe from back when you were studying in college. How did you end up getting a law degree, and what came first, your passion for the environment and climate or your interest in law?
So I'd like to start even earlier than that if possible.
Okay.
So I grew up at Gaviota State Beach in Southern California. My dad worked for the beach, and that's where I really fell in love with nature. This led me to a career in environmental protection because, of course, we want to protect what we love. My first job out of law school was in Los Gatos. I moved back to Santa Cruz, where I received a double major in biology and literature at UC Santa Cruz years before. Professionally, I've been a clean energy lawyer for about 22 years. I obtained an environmental law certification in law school with the intention of working as a litigator for a nonprofit like Sierra Club. But after interning with Sierra Club and the California Attorney General's Environmental Enforcement Section and the US DOJ's Environmental Enforcement Section, I realized I was going to be spending years trying to get power plants to comply with their Clean Air Act permits instead of working on a solution. So that's why I ended up pivoting to solar energy. My first job as an attorney after law school was working as the general counsel for a solar company in Los Gatos. That company is called Akina Solar, or was. The company had just gone public, so I suddenly found myself in a role as the general counsel for a publicly traded company straight out of law school. One attorney observed that it was a trial by fire if I didn't succeed, because it was going to be a very public event. After several years of not burning to the ground, I found that I actually was able to do things much better than the outside counsel, the large firms that I was managing. So that experience gave me a lot of confidence, and it also gave me an inside view of the clean energy industry from the inside of a solar construction company that was actually building solar systems. And that's where I really learned how hard it is to run a solar contracting business and the slim margins that they work on. But perhaps my favorite experience from those times was working on solar policy efforts in Washington, D.C. But after about 5 years there, I found myself wanting a career change, mainly for personal reasons, not the least of which was wanting to cut down on my commute time without leaving Santa Cruz. So that's when I founded Estriatus Law, and that's my private law practice, as you mentioned. I've been running that for about 17 years, and I work almost exclusively with clean energy companies and the customers that they serve. So really my entire career as an attorney has lived as at the intersection of two groups, the people who want to own their own clean energy supplies and the people who want to keep people from owning clean energy supplies so that they can keep selling them utility power. And so at the end of last year, I co-founded a nonprofit, SolarWAVE Action, with Jenny Folkeson, who's our executive director. Jenny's a computer scientist with a PhD from the University of Copenhagen. We started SolarWAVE Action after working together successfully last year to get a California law enacted. That law is AB 1104. And during that process, we saw how many inaccuracies are being lodged in the bill making process related to data on clean energy ownership issues. In particular, we saw firsthand how the millions of Californians who actually own solar or want to purchase solar are extremely underrepresented in basically all things impacting them. And many times there's literally no one at the table speaking for them. And that's not because their interests don't matter, but simply because there's a lack of independent legal and data analysis that's being presented on the side of the solar ratepayer. So that's what we're doing working at SolarWAVE Action. We have a research and advocacy mission, and we're a 501c4. Our mission is to power clean energy policy with legal and data analysis through independent, owner-first, evidence-based, and open source data.
Wow. So you answered a lot of my questions already. So let's dig a little bit deeper into why do you think there is a tension between people who want to own their own solar supply and people who want to prevent them? I would say apart from the obvious fossil fuel interests that see solar as their competition, is there another reason for the tension?
Well, I think the tension really relates to what I would call the cost shift myth narrative. And I think it's important to really talk about that cost shift narrative directly, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are listening, including people who can't own solar, who feel that solar customers got a good deal that wasn't available to them and that they're the ones paying for a grid while solar owners are paying less. And I think it's really important to respond to that person. And first, I want to take that concern very seriously because the anxiety underneath it is very real. California utility rates are way too high. People are stretched, and that's how they're feeling. They're not wrong to feel about their bill. What they're wrong about is the cause. The cost shift myth really gets the math backwards. A typical California residential utility rate runs about 40 cents a kilowatt hour. According to Severin Borenstein, he's at the UC Berkeley's Haas Energy Institute, only about 12 to 15 cents of that reflects the actual competitive costs of generating and delivering electricity. The other 25 plus cents, more than half of the bill, covers fixed costs, and those are capital projects, wildfire mitigation, public purpose programs, and the more than 10% return on equity that investor-owned utilities earn on their rate base. The single largest driver of the recent rate increases is wildfire-related capital spending. The California Public Utilities Advocate Office attributes roughly 21% of a typical residential bill to wildfire costs. PG&E's 10,000-mile undergrounding program is projected at $3 to $6 million per mile. So the cost shift isn't what people think it is. It's not a payment from one neighbor to another. It's a quirk of how investor-owned utilities are allowed to recover their costs. In California, the utility is decoupled from sales volume, and that means that regulators guarantee the utility their often authorized revenue requirement no matter how much electricity actually flows. So when a customer generates some of their own power, the utility's authorized revenue doesn't change, but it gets spread over fewer kilowatt hours, so the price per kilowatt hour goes up. The neighbor with solar didn't take anything from the neighbor without solar. The regulatory framework just took a lost sale and converted it into a rate increase for everyone.
Can I ask you about that? So if there is a rate increase for everyone, and I have solar and you don't, that means you pay more because of the higher rate, and I
So
don't pay more because I have solar.
Right, that's a great question. So here's the metaphor that I like to use. So imagine someone in your neighborhood grows tomatoes in their backyard and brings the extra to the Saturday farmers market. The grocery store down the street sells fewer tomatoes that month. We don't see the home gardener is shifting costs onto the grocery store's other customers. We don't call the gardener's tomato earnings a subsidy. Somebody grew something, somebody bought it, and that's a market. Solar is the same. Customer-owned solar isn't extracting money from the grid. It's selling energy on the grid the way a backyard garden sells produce at the farmer's market. So I think that's really what should stick. I think if you want to know who is actually shifting costs in California, we need to look at things that we're actually not even talking about. For instance, large energy users like data centers, which are called hyperscalers, are queuing up to connect to the grid, and every megawatt of demand they bring means hundreds of $1 million in new transmission, substation, and generating capacity. All of it goes into the rate base. Ratepayers pay for it through the same volumetric charges that recover every other utility cost, yet nobody calls that a cost shift. A homeowner with rooftop solar nudges the rate base up a few dollars. A single hyperscale data center can add hundreds of millions, even billions in capital recovery that gets spread across every customer's bill. So the framing has less to do with math than the cost we choose to highlight. And I think it's really important to note that a system that grows more expensive every time customers use less of it isn't a market, it's a design flaw. I think there's two fixes worth taking seriously. I think we have some ideas, but the first would be structural, is that's to unbundle the fixed grid costs from the volumetric charges so that utility revenue no longer depends on selling more electricity. And the second is to expand who actually gets to own their own clean energy, to put generation, storage, and the savings that come with them within the reach of more Californians. And that's what we're working on at SolarWAVE Action, is the data analysis and some policy proposals to help make that possible. Because broader solar ownership is really the path to answering and helping with the affordability crisis. And I think that's the conversation we need to be having instead of the one we keep having about rooftop solar cost shifts.
So can we talk a little bit more? So as an economist, it's been always puzzling to me how producing more energy, which is what rooftop solar does, makes things worse for anybody, because my app constantly asks me if I want to share my stored energy with my neighbors during outage. And I am selling energy to the grid during very high peak demands when everybody's running air conditioning. I agree with you that in the market there would never be those perverse incentives, especially now when the data centers are entering the picture and consuming huge amount of energy. Can we go back a little bit to what you said about their impact on our utility bills? Because every time I go to a meeting where the AI companies are trying to explain how they're not bad, they say, no, we don't take power from existing grid. We develop additional capacity. We're not impacting consumer energy supply. Is that not true in California?
Yeah, I don't think that is true. Data center demand is happening in current time. And everybody's trying to find ways to supply the power that they need because it's a huge market. And I am actually really excited about this conversation and the concept because I actually think that pairing distributed solar with data center demand is a huge opportunity. And that's because the technical consensus on it has formed faster than almost anyone in the energy world has expected. So 6 months ago, the dominant narrative about AI infrastructure was that hyperscalers would build 5 gigawatt off-campus grids with private nuclear deals. And that's still happening in some places. But in May of this year, Google, Meta, Amazon Web Services, they quietly converged on a different infrastructure philosophy. And that is smaller distributed grid connected facilities. Google said off-grid does not work. Meta acknowledged the redundancy in permitting math. Amazon Web Services made probably the most consequential admission, and that's that smaller data centers work fine, which will be roughly 90% of AI demand by 2030. And here's why that matters for the grid, especially for California. So a 50 to 150 megawatt grid connected data center can be economically paired with dedicated solar plus storage at roughly an 80% load match. Suddenly, this 24/7 clean power problem becomes solvable. The interconnection queue becomes navigable. And by some estimates, the distributed inference model unlocks roughly 100,000 megawatts of trapped capacity on the existing grid. And that is enormous. So now if we apply that to California, California has the inputs. We have distributed grid hosting capacity. We have a mature solar industry, a supply chain, the workforce. But what we do lack is a policy framework that makes data center growth that's co-financing distributed solar really workable. And that's what we're working at SolarWAVE Action as a policy concept. One thing we're working on is a potential policy vehicle to support fast tracking interconnection in exchange for funding an equivalent amount of distributed solar for the local end users. We're not against data centers. I actually think it's a huge opportunity, and I think a lot of people in the industry agree with that. What we are against is data centers being built in a way that raises everyone's bills and locks in another generation of gas peakers as backup capacity. But I do think there's a way to kind of do it right from a technical perspective, and one where California ends up with more distributed solar, less long distance transmission, less reliance on gas peakers, and more grid resilience. And I actually think this would lower the bills for customers who currently have no shield against rate increases while also enabling a workable AI build out. I think this is truly like a path off oil. And it's AI coming onto the scene is actually opening up this door for distributed solar. And it's actually a pretty exciting time.
That's very interesting. I haven't thought about it that way. So we can get those data centers to basically support green transition.
Exactly.
Before I ask you more about the policies you're working on, do you know the current data centers, how much do they still rely on fossil fuel energy?
I don't have numbers. That's one of the things we'll be looking at through SolarWAVE Action, and specifically Jenny, who's really our data scientist. She's going to be pulling the numbers from across the nation and doing a deep dive analysis on that, so I can follow up with that information.
I'm just trying to figure out if I should feel bad when I ask a question to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude.
I wouldn't feel bad personally. I do think that data centers paired with distributed solar are going to be just what we need to move us forward, because it truly is the distributed solar capacity that is ready to go within a year to 2 years' time. That's going to be the answer to the energy needs that we're facing.
Yeah, the rooftop real estate is going to become in high demand. So tell me a little bit more about what policymakers you're working with specifically, if you can share that. Are you working with lobby firms, or how does SolarWave actually do the work that you do? And I understand it's a very young nonprofit, so maybe you can also talk hypotheticals and plans.
Yeah. So SolarWAVE Action is an independent nonprofit. We are not funded by utilities. We are not funded by trade associations. We're not funded by any party with a financial interest in the outcome of the proceedings we engage in. And I think that independence is really important. It's also the reason we're kind of running very lean. Our 2026 program needs funding. We need funding for four things: the legal and economic analysis of what actually is driving utility bills in California, policy briefs that put data center cost allocation on the public record, drafting support for our policies, and assisting with the open source data tools that we'll be providing that any researcher or advocate can use after we publish them. So if anybody cares about this work, and especially if you're an academic, small business owner, somebody with solar in your roof, or somebody who wishes you had solar, you can find us on the website solarwaveaction.org. We have a donate link there as well. And any amount helps. So does the introduction to a foundation or co-signing a letter, just joining our mailing list, because we're building a community. As you mentioned, we're very new. There's no other organization in California that does exactly what we do. And so I think there's one excellent is in particular trade association, CALSA, and there's a residential focused association called the Solar Rights Alliance. But there's no organization whose entire purpose is independent legal and data analysis on behalf of the people, the businesses who own and want to own their own clean energy. Our goal is to be that organization. I think the time is incredibly important. We do all of our own, legal work and lobbying. We don't pay outside consultants for that.
So, and you're still running your law firm, is that right?
That is
So
correct.
you do two full-time jobs?
Yeah.
So if I am a small business owner in Santa Cruz, or if I'm a farmer, I have land, and I'm interested in installing solar. Actually, two questions. If I want to install solar to run my own business, or if I'm a farmer and I actually want to make some money from selling energy from the solar I can install on my land, what is the process like?
So you go out and you get some quotes from some solar contractors, you compare them, and then you make a decision and go hopefully get some recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest issues that you might run up against is interconnection delays, and that no contractor can overcome that. And it's a big issue that we're actually dealing with in the industry, not through SolarWAVE Action. That's more of the trade associations trying to help with that. There is an audit of the utility interconnection process currently underway that's been ordered by the state legislature because the utilities are consistently missing the deadlines that they're required to meet to interconnect new solar systems to the grid. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest problems is interconnection delays. But, the bill we worked on last year, AB 1104, that was signed into law, is a good example of what we can do and the difference we can make. So AB 1104 was a commercial solar bill, and we worked on it with our Assembly member Gail Pellerin, and we formed a coalition with the Santa Cruz Chamber of Commerce and Scudder Solar. And what it did was it exempted the owner of a business from public works requirements. And it's a big deal because it's almost impossible for a small business to jump through all the hoops that are required of a public agency if they just want to put solar on their property. So that bill was really important. And we did an impact analysis on AB 1104, which showed that just for 1 year, that in 2024 installation rates, which was the first year that was impacted, that a single year of stalled projects would have cost local businesses between 193,000 and 263,000 in
Oh.
lost annual savings. So that's just 1 year of savings that were lost until AB 1104 was enacted, and it could be predicted that that would have continued to impact our county.
So if I own a coffee shop, is the permitting process going to be pretty much as easy as for the individual homeowner solar
So it's not
installation?
using the permitting process. The solar contractor can help you through that.
Mm-hmm.
And that really depends on your local jurisdiction. It's the interconnection process with the utility your contractor will help you through, but that is where all of the delays come and where lots of
Mm-hmm.
headaches are created. So it's a huge problem.
Well, but assuming that is going to be resolved, I remember I had to wait like 6 months for my rooftop on my little house to be connected. But if I want to actually make money from selling energy to the grid, is it, does that make sense economically, like in terms of the rate I'm going to get?
So I think it's important to understand California's solar policy and the history, like more broadly, because it's quite interesting and it matters. And it also shows why this moment feels different. So California has been a national leader on distributed solar for more than 20 years. Since the early 2000s, Californians have installed approximately 18 gigawatts of customer-owned solar. That is more electricity generation capacity than most US states have in total. And the
Oh, wow.
policy vehicle that made this possible is net energy metering, which is also known as NEM. So
Mm-hmm.
under the original program, which is NEM 1, when panels were producing more energy than was used, the surplus was exported to the grid and the owner was credited at roughly the full retail rate. As the market grew, the policy was rewritten into NEM 2.0 in 2016. And while NEM 2.0 kept the retail rate credits, it mandated time of use rate schedules and introduced small non bypassable charges on grid energy. making the financial math slightly tighter, but it was still meaningful. These two programs, NEM 1.0 and 2.0, were highly successful with legacy customers officially grandfathered into the rates for a 20-year period. And the programs made the financial math work for hundreds of thousands of households, small businesses, schools, and municipal facilities who began investing heavily in solar energy. In my view, NEM 1 and NEM 2 were probably the most successful state level climate policies in US history. Unfortunately, in December 2022, the CPUC, that's our State Public Utility Commission, made a drastic rewrite of the NEM rules under pressure from the utilities to provide lower credits to solar customers. So in December 2022, the CPUC adopted what is officially called the net billing tariff and informally known as NEM 3. And that took effect a year and a half after it was adopted and took effect in April of 2023. And by the CPUC's own modeling, the net billing tariff, or NEM 3, reduced export compensation for solar customers by approximately 75% of previous amounts.
Wow.
Unsurprisingly, rooftop solar applications fell off a cliff afterwards. So that's kind of like the short version of where we are. But to be fair, there's an honest argument behind NEM 3, and that's that retail compensation overpaid for exports, and that goes back to that cost shift to non-solar. But as we discussed, I don't think that cost shift argument survives under real scrutiny. But unfortunately, it was the rationale and resulted in the NEM 3 program, and that cost shift narrative is still being heavily pushed and circulated far and wide. And that's really because the people that are most affected didn't have the weight to push back onto it.
Right.
And so that really brings me back to what we're trying to do at SolarWAVE Action, which is push back against it.
All right. Wow. Thank you so much. That was super informative. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I thank you very much for the work you're doing, for your commitment to climate solutions. I'm a big believer in the fact that we have solutions, we just need to implement them. And so thank you, Angela, for your time.
Thank you so much, Galina. It was a real pleasure.
This has been Cutting Edge at KSQD 90.7. I'm Galina Hale. Goodbye.